We are truly blessed to have some really epic champions inside Raid Shadow Legends, forgive the pun there, and we're going to be talking about probably one of the best, especially for a late game account or somebody just really looking to progress through some content. When I say that, you probably immediately think of, a damage dealer or a tanky champion that can help you revive, or maybe a support type champion that can revive your team or heal you or those sorts of things, but it's not going to be any of those options. And if you're an astute observer that clicked on this video, you may have noticed either the thumbnail or the title, both of which are very obvious as to who the champion is, but we're going to hop into it anyways, and that is going to be Fahrakin the Fat Man himself. This guy has been added to the game a few years ago now at this point, and he was actually quite a significant addition when he came, because there wasn't a whole lot of ally attack champions inside the game, certainly not at an epic level, certainly not at the level he does it. So what makes him so good? He has an A1, which just straight up has a 40% chance, 50 when booked, of placing the big version of decreased defense. Pretty basic A1. He has an A2, which attacks one enemy, 100% chance placing an HP burn debuff, and 5% poison debuffs for 2 turns. This means that this guy can be your poisoner for clan boss quite easily, as well as bringing a decreased defense and a HP burn, which is so damn good for setting yourself up for more damage, right? This guy is going to absolutely amplify the amount of damage that your team is outputting with that decreased defense. And finally, Beatdown is going to be on a 4-turn cooldown, places an increased crit rate and an increased crit damage buff on all allies except this champion for 3 turns. Then, all allies except this champion will attack one target enemy. This is such a strong ally attack because you're getting the increased crit rate for 3 turns, increased crit damage for 3 turns. It is so strong. Realistically, you can build your champions with 70% crit rate, and most of the time, he's going to ensure that they have that increased crit rate on them, so you can save yourself a lot of stats. He then also has a passive that deflects 20% of all incoming damage this champion receives onto all allies. The damage will be spread equally across all allies. This does sound like a bit of a downside. However, it's only 20% of the damage he takes. If he takes 10,000 damage, he is mitigating 2,000 of that damage and spreading that equally to everybody else, right? So it's really nothing to sweat about. He doesn't have very solid base stats, so this is a solid way to help him survive, essentially. And it's so useful, especially for later game content where the enemies are just hitting so hard. They put out so much damage, right? He's going to really be able to be a bit more tanky than a lot of other epic champions that you might see. And as you can see, he has absolutely insane ratings all the way across the board. Now, a 4.3 on arena offense and a 3.6 on arena defense is a little bit questionable. I do think there are certainly better options out there than him, but he is a very solid champion. Let's go ahead and let's take a look at him inside my particular account here and see how we have him built. So he is +2 empowered, and he is 3-star awakened, and because of that, I do have Phantom Touch on him, which I would highly recommend if you're going to be running him inside any sort of, for example, Fire Knight content, or content where you just want a little bit of extra damage from him. He is fully booked, of course. We don't have a relic on him because I couldn't really think of a relic that I have on my particular account that would actually benefit him, so these are the relics. Hope you've seen them. We have masteries, which he isn't even fully mastered out, and you're going to see how strong he is and how crucial he is to a lot of my teams. In terms of the build, this is what we're rocking. So we have 40,000 HP, 3,200 defense, 297 on the speed, so he is quite a speedy boy, 273 and 276 on the resistance and accuracy respectively. We're going to be showcasing him in Fire Knight. This is how the stats change, so he's well over 300 speed. He's at 317. Now this is very much a late game or an end game build for this particular champion. I don't expect anybody to be meeting these particular requirements. However, as you'll see, his gear is very suboptimal, as I always say on these things, right? There's very few champions, now that I come to think of it, that actually have optimal gear on my account, so maybe I should be doing some re-gearing at some point in the future. As you can see, some of these pieces could be glyphed out even further. Some of them have low rolls. They're offsets, right? So I have like 2 Swift Parry sets in here just because they're the fastest gear I happen to have. Importantly, I do have 2 refresh accessories on him. So these will have a chance to prevent the skill cooldown, of course, on his A3, which means that, he's going to have a higher chance of cycling back around to that a bit quicker. And to that same effect, you could very easily run him in, you know, a 9-piece Merciless if you happen to have that. You could very easily run him in, for example, Reflex or more Refresh accessories, those sorts of things, and he's going to be a very solid champion in that regard. I'm going to show you him, though, importantly on my Spider hard team. Rather, my Fire Knight hard team, not Spider. I was looking at where it said Spider and I got confused. I've showcased this team a lot for Fire Knight Hard Stage 6 specifically. This team is also capable of beating Stage 10, but there's a little bit more RNG behind it. Real quick, I'll show you the team setup if you're not going to watch the rest of, or rather the other video essentially that showcases this. So this is how the team is set up. Nothing too crazy. You can kind of look through here. I have full videos breaking down how this works. And finally, we're on to Newt. That's how he's working, right? So we're going to go ahead. We're going to do this fight. I'm going to kind of talk you through a few things to consider about Fahrakin, builds, all those sorts of good things. So obviously, first of all, you do want him to have the lowest cooldowns possible so he can get more ally attacks out, which are going to massively increase the amount of damage that you can get from this champion. So you want to build him in sets that will help to allow that. So again, Merciless set at the full maxed out bonus is going to give you a 15% chance of an extra turn. And then I believe it's also a chance of a skill cooldown effect at like 4 pieces or something like that. I don't recall specifically. And then obviously you can have something like, for example, refresh accessories on him. You can bring a champion that decreases cooldowns. So for example, Renegade, Prince Kaimar, Crixia, Lady of Aerith, any champions like that can be really, really effective. Any sort of extra turn mechanics. So for example, Relentless, right? Or again, Merciless, I believe it's at the 4-piece set, gives you a chance of an extra turn. As you can see, the refresh accessory just proc there, so as soon as he gets back around to his next turn, he's going to have a chance of doing the ally attack again because it's off cooldown now. The second thing to consider is a lot of people are going to get a lot of benefit out of this champion inside Fire Knight. Now, if you are going to run him inside Fire Knight hard, what is absolutely crucial, and do not make this mistake, this is like probably the most important thing about his kit, turn off his A2 if you're using him inside Fire Knight hard. Absolutely has to be turned off. Why is that? Well, Fire Knight hard, it's mandatory that you place freezes on the boss to reduce the boss's turn meter. That means, however, in Raid Shadow Legends, we have a maximum of 10 debuffs that can be placed on any particular champion, boss, or enemy at a single time. With Fire Knight, in order to place that freeze, you have to have a free debuff slot available, which means that you can have a maximum of 9 debuffs on him at any point. As you see through this wave, or as you see when I showcased his kit, he can stack up debuffs very quickly and very effectively. So if he cycles his A2, and certainly, especially if he has the decrease effects on the A2, the decreased cooldowns, right, so resets or whatnot, he's going to stack up poisons specifically very effectively on the boss, and it's only going to take a few turns for him to max out the debuff bar on the boss. And realistically, if you're doing the fight correctly, the boss shouldn't be getting a turn, right? So sooner or later, you're not going to be able to place poisons on the boss anymore. I made this mistake the first time I ever run him in Fire Knight hard. That was an oversight on my part. Haven't made it since though, so that's certainly a plus. You can see here on stage 3, he's going to help us cycle through our turns so much. The Phantom Touch having a chance to come in with extra procs of damage is incredibly strong as well. And then of course, we don't have, I don't think, a decreased defense champion on this team apart from, of course, Fahrakin the Fat, right? So that also opens up, you know, just a magnitude of team synergies, because if you don't have a decreased defense champion, so for example, how are you going to slot in like a Lydia to this team, right? Because you need turn meter control, you need increased speeds, ally attacks, all those sorts of things. You can't really bring a Lydia into a team like this. You can't really bring you know, Venus into a team like this because she doesn't have freezes or anything like that, right? So Fahrakin can set you up for success with the decreased defense. Then if you also have, for example, some sort of a debuff spread or something like that, you can essentially spread that to the rest of the enemies as well, which is so incredibly strong. So he has a very solid kit, and he's been added quite some time ago inside the game as far as Raid Shadow Legends, and certainly as far as champions and epics go, right? And It's just so cool to see that as we're at the start of 2025 here, he is still an incredibly strong champion who gets so much use all over the game. Whenever I'm going through City of Centranos, especially on the boss stages, if I can pick Fahrakin the Fat, and if I go and look at like the best teams, right, it's almost guaranteed that he's in there. I would debate that City of Centranos is currently probably some of the hardest content that we have inside the game, because not only are you going against enemies with ridiculous stats, you're then also having your roster massively restricted. There are certain rotations where if I look at my entire clan, or if I look at literally the best teams worldwide, Fahrakin the Fat is in every single one of them when it comes to beating Amius, the Lunar Archon himself, right? That is so incredibly strong, and that's so incredibly important to mention because a lot of players are inevitably going to invest in champions that won't necessarily last them the longest, right? So for example, I invested in champions that I no longer use. This particular rotation of Amius, we do have Fahrakin the Fat, who's an option. So let's just take a look through, you know, the clan and the world rankings. So we have Fahrakin, right? We have Mikage, who could be replaced by Fahrakin, same thing. We have Mikage, and Fahrakin. We have Mikage, and again, basically in any of these teams where you have Mikage, you could easily substitute in Fahrakin. They're going to do the same thing, right? Mikage is there for the ally attack. You have Mikage, and Mikage. If we look at the global rankings, you're going to see Fahrakin in here so often as well. So literally the best team that has beaten Amius with one turn taken is a cheese that involves Fahrakin the Fat. Mikage, two Mikages, Fahrakin the Fat and Mikage, Fahrakin the Fat and Mikage, Fahrakin the Fat, Fahrakin the Fat, Fahrakin the Fat, Fahrakin, two Mikages could replace it with a Fahrakin, Mikage and Fahrakin, Fahrakin, and Fahrakin. As you can see, he is a very popular gentleman inside this particular game mode, and these are all teams that are beating it within like 3 turns taken, right? It's absolutely obscene, and Amius, of course, is good to farm. I rarely do it because I just can't be bothered to sit here and try to manual this, and I don't necessarily have the cheese that a lot of players rely on for this. But he's so good to farm because you get great gear drops from it, first of all. And then not only that, you're also getting absolutely insane rewards over time, right? So you're going to work your way up to Carnage, which you get him way quicker if you're clearing all the stages and then also defeating Amius, of course. And he does look to be a pretty fantastic champion. From everything I see about him and everything I see when people are using him, he is absolutely insane. So to take an epic champion and build them and still have that epic champion being used inside the end game is so important, because especially if you're a low spend or a free-to-play player, you want to make sure that your resources are being used smartly. You don't want to be investing in, say, Duke the Pierced, right? I built out Duke a long time ago when I needed like a decreased defense champion. I do not use this guy anymore, apart from in Faction Wars, and he's literally naked there. Rowan, I'm building out because she was one of my most wanted champions for a long time because I like how she looks and I want to do a showcase on her. I don't use her. Built out Gembo. Don't use them. There's going to be so many champions that you build out and you don't use, but even for myself as a late game player who has almost every single epic inside the game, Fahrakin the Fat gets almost daily use on my account, so you can feel good putting your hard-earned resources into him, your books, farming masteries, all those sorts of good things. He's going to help your account so much. Let me know if you have him built and where you use him. I'd love to hear about it down in the comments below. Of course, thank you guys all so much for the support on the channel. See you next time.